Hi everyone, it's Jerry. The bishop and knight checkmate is regarded by many as the most difficult checkmate to master. It's one that I know well, and I'm going to share with you a systematic approach to solving this endgame so that you too can master it. Now, the first thing to take note of is we have 50 moves or less to deliver checkmate. Otherwise, it's considered a draw. So where do we begin? Well, we begin by looking at what color square our bishop is on. Since we're working with a light square bishop, this means we can only force checkmate if the opposing king is in a light square corner. In this case, we're talking about A8 or H1. Now, the first of 6 steps is to simply centralize our pieces. And let me be more exact. Keep in mind that our knight is best coordinated with our bishop by playing to the same color square as our bishop. With that said, that means our bishop and knight will be the ones who occupy these two central light squares. Our king, on the other hand, will be on d4 or e5. And in this case, he's going to end up on e5. And when he gets there, I'll let you know why exactly we wanted him on the e5 square. So let's hop to it. Let's get these pieces centralized and complete step 1. Our bishop is looking good. We have our king now on this e5 square and our knight now on the same color square as our bishop. This took 10 moves, and it should take roughly 10 moves for you to achieve this type of position. And during these 10 moves, you'll note that the black king is staying far away from these light corner squares where we can force checkmate. He's trying to put up as much resistance as possible by staying near this dark corner square. And the reason we wanted our king on this e5 square is for the simple fact that this black king is staying near this corner square, and we want our king as close to this corner square as possible. So that's why we want our king on e5. In fact, in step 2, which is a very simple step, we want to shift our king one step closer diagonally towards this corner square. And this is done by first making a waiting move. Waiting moves, by the way, in this endgame are done with the king and the bishop, never the knight. So let's make a waiting move with our king. Our bishop is fine where he's at, nice and central. So king to f5, king h7, king f6. We're done with step 2. What we do in step 3 is kick the king out of the corner and then optimize our bishop and knight's position. Now, when we do this, when we kick the king out of the corner, what's going to happen is that he will end up in one of 2 large triangles. Now, what large triangles am I talking about? I'm talking about the following large triangles that we can generate, starting first at this light corner square and drawing like so. This is one of the triangles he can end up in, or this one right here. Once he is forced out of the corner, he is going to enter one of these 2 large triangles. And just to give a quick summary, once he is in one of those 2 large triangles, we will then try to kick him into a medium-sized triangle, and then finally one of these 2 small triangles, and then give checkmate. So let's see how we can do just that. In order to kick the king out of the corner, we need the help of our knight. He needs to control this corner square, and he could do so by playing to f7 or g6. We're going to play to f7 in this case, and we could see that that is the square using the bishop as our reference point. It's the same square that the bishop can also go to. So let's get our knight to f7, but let's be a little bit careful about how we do so. If we play to g5 looking to get here, this is stalemate. The black king has no legal moves and is clearly not in check. This is stalemate, a draw in other words, and we want to avoid that. So we can do so by first pivoting on d6 and only then jumping into this f7 square. He is controlling this corner square. The black king is now very limited, having only one move, king g8. And now we shift our king over so he guards the h7 square, king to g6. All of these squares I have highlighted are controlled, which means that the king is now forced in the direction we want him to go to, namely a8. Now, let me point out that this position right here is one that can come about where it is white to move. And if that is the case, all you need to do is make a waiting move with the bishop, keeping him on this diagonal of the large triangle. And you could simply drop him back to b3. The king will then have to go to g8, and it's the same procedure. The king shifts over to defend h7. Okay, but that's not the case. It was black to move in that case. And once he's on f7, once he's moving in this direction, we move our knight. We centralize our knight. So the only way to centralize him is to play to e5, one of those 4 central squares, and when he is there, notice what happens. The bishop is now allowed to guard the g8 square, which means the king can't go back to the corner. And after king to e7, this is where we now optimize our bishop and knight's position. The way we do this, envisioning this large triangle, we post the bishop 1 square from the edge of a triangle. So in this case, it's either b3 or f7, but we're not going to go to this f7 square. The king will be in charge of guarding the squares near this edge of the triangle. So it's the further end of the triangle that we want the bishop to post up to. So in this case, it's bishop to b3, and after king d6, we now post the knight right across from the bishop with 1 square separating them. Now take note of the great number of squares that the bishop and knight alone are controlling. They are forming a great wall, and as we can see here, there is no way for this black king to escape to the a1 square. What we do from here is use our king and bishop to help push the king into that medium-sized triangle. Now, before we get to pushing the king into that medium-sized triangle, let me just point out that you may encounter an opponent who runs away voluntarily from the dark corner square. So let me quickly revert back to this position right here, where we saw the king go to the corner. What happens if the king tries to make a mad dash towards, let's say, this other corner? This is how we can treat such a player. We can play our bishop to this g8 square, and our goal with this is to post our bishop on the diagonal of the large triangle. We've done just that. The king still tries to run away. What we want to do next with our bishop is optimize him, and that's done by posting him right here, 1 square from the edge. We want to get our bishop on c2, so we need to get our knight out of the way. If our bishop is on c2, we want to get our knight right here. So we post our knight on d6. The king still tries to run. Our knight gets to c4. The king is still trying to run. Our bishop plays here, and very similar to the position we just saw, this bishop and knight control all of these squares and yet again form a great wall. From here, you would then push the king into this medium-sized triangle in this direction, and then finally the very small triangle right here. But he did not go in that direction, but I believe it's an important a what-if scenario to cover. He did instead go to the corner. We ended up going about the position like so, where we have our bishop and knight controlling, again, all of these squares, blocking the king off. So what we do from here is use our king and bishop alone to push the king into this medium-sized triangle. So let's do that next. We get our king working. He's controlling this square. And we need to make a waiting move. Waiting moves, again, are done with the bishop and king alone. And when we're going to make a waiting move, we're going to do so along this diagonal. So bishop c4, king there, bishop f7. This king is now forced in the direction we want him to go to, namely a8. The king goes to d6, king to f8. We are slowly but surely forcing this king in the direction we want him to go to. In fact, he is now inside this medium-sized triangle. And what we do now is shift our bishop. We no longer need our bishop on this diagonal, but rather the one on A4, where he is controlling the diagonal of the medium-sized triangle. So we get our king working and our bishop working. In this position, he was, of course, attacked. We want to, similar to how we optimized the bishop in the large triangle, we do so in the medium-sized triangle as well. One square away from the edge. In this case, it would be D7 or B5. If you go to B5, you're just getting captured. So the bishop posts up. He is optimized on this D7 square. And after king to B6, now is where we can reposition our knight. In fact, our knight, for the rest of the game, he will only make 4 more moves. And I could actually tell you the exact moves he will make from here on out. He's going to be playing to F4, D5, F6, and D7. He's going to do this little zigzag, and on that 4th move, he's going to give either check or checkmate. Now, from this point right here, the knight is wanting to centralize himself on this D5 square. That is 3 squares away from the corner square where we want the king to be. We want our knight on the D5 square. So let's get him there. First, posting up on F4. After king to A5, the king is ready to run away, but our knight is there just in the nick of time to guard the B4 square. And if we just take a look at, again, the bishop and knight's dominant position, look at all of the squares that they're controlling. Yet again, a great wall is being formed, and this king is now restricted to exactly these 6 squares. Just like we did in the large triangle, we now use our king and bishop to force the king into the small triangle. So let's see that take shape. That is done by having our king come over in this direction and push the king up towards the corner square. So king A6, king C5, king C4. We get our king working all the way up here, and now we have an opportunity to finally post our bishop on the diagonal of the small triangle. Bishop C8. King attacks the bishop, bishop A6, king A7, and we could just make a waiting move at this point. This is not the most efficient checkmate that I'm showing you from this point on. It's 1 move slower than what you can really do, but just for visual purposes, I'm going to make a king move and then play king to B6. Right here is really this final position that you want to achieve, where the bishop is on that diagonal and the king is right next to the bishop. From this position, we've restricted the king to just these 2 squares. And from here, all we're needing to do is deliver checkmate, and that's done like so. Moving the knight to this F6 square, we essentially just want to control B8 at this point with the knight eventually, and that happens soon enough. Bishop B7, king to B8, and finally knight to D7, and that's checkmate. So that's all for this video. As always, I hope you got something out of it. Take care. Bye.